Our Tuesday morning routine here, as always, is to welcome, Psychologically Speaking, Dr. John Braccio, Regional Psychological Services in East Lansing. Do you know someone, or perhaps you are someone who struggles with ADHD? How do you know if you do or if that person does? To be honest with you, boys are diagnosed with ADHD much more than girls, and we're going to find out about that and other things with Dr. Braccio. Dr. Braccio, it's great to have you on the show.
Well, listen, nice talking to you, Mike, and certainly wish you the best in your new endeavor, and nice to be part of the team here with you. Let me talk a little bit here about this ADHD as it relates to women in terms of diagnosis. And first, the hallmarks of ADHD are inattention, impulsivity, and hyperactivity. Boys are diagnosed for ADHD as much as 3 to 1 versus girls in childhood and adolescence. The number decreases to roughly 2 to 1 for adults, but still quite significant. Really, the end result is that many women who meet the diagnosis of ADHD are not diagnosed because they tend to not have the hyperactive, disruptive, and outgoing behaviors that are the more prevalent among men than women and lead to their being diagnosed with ADHD. So far more than men, women tend to fit in the category of inattention and lack of focus, which just really are not as easily noticed in life, but the end result can lead to, women not being appropriately diagnosed. And if one's not appropriately diagnosed, it really can lead to these types of situations for the person. Missing out on school activities or work activities due to not being able to focus and pay attention, which has to get done. Problems developing friendships because of a lack of attention and attending to them. They can be perceived as not caring for the friendships. Being perceived in a negative way as like spaced out, daydreamer, addle-headed, silly, non-caring, overly chatty, or airheaded. And strong possibility of comorbidity with anxiety, depression, learning disability, and substance abuse. And then inappropriate medical and psychological treatments due to misdiagnosis, because treatment, for example, anxiety would be different than for ADHD in terms of medication, in terms of treatment. So it is quite important to get appropriate diagnosis, and because women do tend to not have these, as a group, the hyperactive, impulsive type behaviors of men, it does lead to a difference in diagnosis and can lead to a negative outcome by not being diagnosed and not being treated for the condition.
Okay. In boys, we see hyperactive boys all the time. And in a guy, does that necessarily, just being hyper or really active, it seems to me boys are just that way mostly. That doesn't necessarily mean ADHD, correct?
Well, here's what I mean. In order for a person to be diagnosed, it isn't that they just have the symptoms, that it negatively impacts in their life, and has to be in 2 areas of their life. Because a lot of people, you can be hyper, you can be active, you can have these behaviors, but when they really start negatively impacting in your life, then that's when it becomes a problem and diagnosis, and some combination of counseling and medication can be helpful. The problem is, and this can be for men too, but if it falls into the category of inattentive, okay, the lack of focus, lack of attention, and no one's really noting this, you can be perceived as just kind of an airhead, or not paying attention, or dreaming off, whatever it might be. And if that happens, then you can be missing out on a lot that's going on in life, going on at school, going on at work. And then there does tend to be a very high percentage of women in this area of ADHD, because there's really 3 different definitions within ADHD. There's the predominantly inattentive, there's the predominantly hyper and impulsive, and there's a combination of the 2. So because women tend, and you're going to have a lot of exceptions here on this thing, Mike, but because the tendency is more to be in the realm of the lack of focus, a lack of attention, then this can lead to them not being diagnosed, not being treated, or the comorbidity, because just a few more facts here. More than 2/3 of persons with ADHD have at least one other coexisting condition, okay? Like 30% of children and 53% of adults also present with anxiety. Up to 50% can have a learning disability. 14% of children present with depression, 43% of adults. So you have a lot of comorbidities, the word, where they share with other diagnoses. So it really is important to determine what is happening. But you mentioned a good point before. The key thing is, does it negatively impact on you? Because there are a lot of people that have a ton of energy that come across as somewhat impulsive, inattentive. And a lot of those folks, if they can channel it, it can lead to great success. However, when they don't, when it doesn't work that way, then that's when it can lead to problems and some need of intervention by school, by work. Because right now, I'd say we're almost doing half of our evals. It's getting more and more of these evaluations being done for adults, not just children.
You brought up a good point of channeling that energy. At what point and how do you, as a doctor, what I guess I'm getting at, how do you determine, is medication needed, or is there something we can do to channel that energy, and what would that be?
Well, I think what you do when you every person is different, obviously, but if you can identify that a person's really having trouble focusing and attention, you try to work with a person, and if there's parents or themselves, depending on adult or child, you work with a person trying to get them to learn strategies for focusing, whether doing it 5-10 minutes, taking a little break every now and then. But starting, if you're in a work setting or you're at the classroom, if you're trying to be closer to where the action is, the activity, not away. When you're working and studying as much as you can, you want to try to be not around a lot of other people, or finding ways to tune out, other people. You also, from a career point of view, it's really important that you find something that you really enjoy, because another situation with persons with attention deficit is they tend to need to be overstimulated. And this sounds kind of odd, but they need to really be interested in something in order to really be interested, in order to really achieve at it. This is why a lot of persons that have these tendencies can as well become a nuclear physicist as a crook, meaning, because, I know it sounds kind of crazy, a police officer, or, meaning risk taker, plane, call it what you will. These are persons that often need more types of stimulus. I'm not trying to say it can be a negative, but it can be a positive. There's really nothing wrong. I have a ton of energy, I've been at my work for 56 years, and I still feel like a kid learning every day. So I think in life, it somewhat depends on the person, but you try to find what are the niches, what are the things that you can do to channel this energy you have, which in the case of ADHD is often far more than someone else, the average person, and channel it in a positive direction. And it does relate to the environment you place yourself in, the work environment you're in. It has to do with the people you're with, the people you choose to be around. So there are a lot of choices. And when you have a guide, you can have a mentor in work situations. You can have a parent who's helping you when you're younger or at a different age also. Friendships, therapists, potential medication. Because the medication, for many persons, the stimulus can be very helpful. It seems the reverse when that you're stimulating, but you're really helping a person be able to channel the energy by channeling all that energy in one place, being really tied into something. But every person is different, Mike, so there's a danger in just trying to say this is the thing for you. But you mentioned a good point, though, earlier, that having a lot of energy and being stimulated, over-focusing even on things, doesn't have to be a negative. It's kind of like the summum bonum of Herl. You need to find a way to channel the energy. And a lot of people have a lack of energy, so they're going the other way. So this is kind of, if you will, dealing with the 800 horsepower engine speeding along and trying to keep yourself, keeping yourself at a little more tuned in, maybe a little more, classical music versus heavy metal. That might be.
I will say. Dr. John Braccio from Regional Psychological Services in East Lansing. Our time is up today, Doctor. This is a very compelling subject, though, and I look forward to chatting with you again, perhaps about this. As every Tuesday, we talk with Dr. Braccio. Thank you very much for being my very first guest, by the way.
Well, Mike, it's nice talking to you and look forward to chatting with you. You seem like a good fellow and wish you the best, okay? Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you, Doctor. Dr. John Braccio from Regional Psychological Services East Lansing. We'll do this. We'll come back here on More Compelling Talk Radio, 1320 WILS.
There is one local family of attorneys you can